Bitcoiners, hope you're doing great. Happy Halloween. Happy White Paper Conception Day, Publication Day. We're going to talk about the amazing synchronicity of Satoshi's work. Lightning Vlad. Good morning from Lightning Vend, pardon me. Good morning from snowy Minnesota. At least the coffee is hot this morning. Indeed, we had a bit of snow here in Quebec yesterday. Not so much, though. Wasn't around. My kids got muddy playing in the snow. It was very, very wet, but that's fine. They had a great time. And it's all clear today, boys. It's sunny here, so we're going to have a nice Halloween. A little cold, but we're used to that. That's fine. Right, P-Man? I'm sure you've been out in cold Halloweens in your life. Bon matin, we're all on this journey to a new era, the separation of money and state. We're going to be talking about all of that. Good morning, beautiful Bitcoiners. Austin Alexander. Hello, Austin. I didn't get a chance to hang out with you at the after party in Amsterdam. You disappeared before I had a chance to say hello, goodbye, all the rest of it. So, Austin, hello, goodbye. Hope you're doing great. Bud. Morning, Bitcoiners. Morning, Bud. T-Dog Yo-Yo. There we go. Happy spooky Bitcoin day. Good morning. Happy Halloween and end of the month Bitcoin pump. We hope so, Thomas. We hope so. Happy White Paper Day. Jevy knows the deal. He knows what we're going to talk about today. He knows the deal. October is almost complete for this year, Bud says. Yeah, one more day, right? Good morning, Pleb Nation. Good morning, Dave. Robert, hope you're doing great. Morning, homies. I'm going to go a little quick, but can't forget Christine, right? Hoddle T knows about the white paper. That's what it's all about today. Welcome from Florida, where Bitcoin is the heartbeat of the Sunshine State. We love it. Veterans Cannabis, Orange Revolution, Breakup Breakfast Coffee, Bitcoin Brilliance. All of those things are on order today. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about. Snowy Wisconsin, Ohio gozaimasu with your katakana in your name, Dean. We love it. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Happy White Paper Day. Happy White Paper, Nick. Hope everything's going great. Why does it have to be a white? Because we got up early, guys. It has to be a white paper because of how early we got up. It's natural, right? And let's just acknowledge we got up really early, but the sun is blasting here on the east coast of North America, and Bitcoin is running great. It's been 15 years since the white paper was written, and we only had the one little hiccup a couple of years ago. That was in like 2010 or something. We're doing great, right? We're doing great. Glad I wasn't doing the breakup the day we had the reorg. That wouldn't have been fun. Don't come here if Bitcoin's not running. We do not know what to say. We will likely not be doing a show that day. All right, now you're here for some fake news. Okay, maybe I'll just come. If Bitcoin is broken, maybe I'll just come and do fake news, and then I'll run and hide and figure out what I'm doing with my life. But we got this coming from Tyson Foods. All right, so Tyson Foods, right? If you folks don't live in America and you don't know what Tyson Food is, they put a lot of food into bags and then in freezers. They're like the big freezer guys, right? So if you want to buy frozen food in America, it's often Tyson. I think they do a few things that probably aren't that bad. I don't mess with the stuff because I buy my food off farmers, of course. But Tyson Foods is investing big in bug protein for a new venture. Great, Tyson. Hope it goes well with the bugs. This one's good too. This is from The Intercept. All right. So apparently all these people who are like, yeah, go kill all the Jews. Okay. Yeah, it's fine. The baby's nothing. Don't worry about it. Go Hamas, right? All these people are losing their jobs now. They're getting fired. All right. So who would have thought that cheering on what happened in Israel would lead to you losing your job, right? So here's what some people are saying. We are seeing people being fired from their jobs, being investigated by HR over their social media posts or conversations with colleagues, and having job offers rescinded. There is a clear trend that people's jobs are being targeted right now, right? It's great. Okay, this is from the Daily Mail. CVS in Washington, D.C. replaces stock with photographs of items as it battles with out-of-control crime and moves to shut 900 stores. So, like, when you buy stuff online, right, you get picture, and then you click on it and you get it. What's the problem here, guys? It's the same. You just get to go to the store now and like click on the picture, right? There's even buttons that they put next to the picture. This press button, so you get to like click in real life. I believe when AR comes out, there won't be any way to tell the difference. Like it'll just look like that, right? You click the picture in the store. So all these guys, they're just ahead. They're just ahead. They're just living ahead of us in Washington, D.C. All these people living in the pharmacies where you just get a picture, don't feel bad for them, okay? Don't feel bad for them. But it's the same thing as online, okay? It's just like AR. Time Magazine with a great cover. All right, Time Magazine released its new magazine probably yesterday. The cover of the magazine, nobody believes in our victory like I do. Nobody. It's been nearly 2 years. Russia still controls a fifth of Ukraine's territory. Tens of thousands of people have been killed. Global support for the war is shrinking. The lonely fight of Zelensky. Oh, Zelensky's lonely. What are we gonna do? All right, so it's one of those times too when I just love when my Moscow time fake news runs right into the story of the day. Of course, today being Halloween, being October 31st, we are in the epicenter, the eye of one of the most amazing syncratic, is that how you would say it? Syncratic events of all time, I've said it many, many times. I believe the first ever public breakup I ever did was November 1st, 2021. So about 2 years ago today. I checked the record today to find out. And of course, I did it on this synchronistic day where the separation of church and state got going in 1517. Martin Luther, of course, posted his edicts. And from there, we had everything that we know today, right? Everything that has defined the era of nation states. If you read The Sovereign Individual, they definitely go back to that frame in order to predict what happens next, in a sense, right? They talk about how it was one of the biggest mega political changes beyond policy, beyond what you can see with your naked eye. It's changes that would go on hundreds of year scales, and everything about it had to do with nation states emerging and a secular state emerging inside of a state. Because of all the misappropriated capital. Really, it was misappropriated capital that led to Martin Luther doing what he did. He said it many times, right? We've seen in The Sovereign Individual where they go through the history of this time and place where the solution to everything was always another feast. It was always another pilgrimage. It was all kinds of money. Everyone was being taxed to crazy amounts. And the crazy amounts of tax were leading to things that had absolutely no effect on making people's lives better. The state was absolutely in throw to the church, and the church had all of the decision-making capacity when it came to spending what can be thought of as public funds at the time, of course, the tithe and the taxation of the church on individuals, as well as their ability to administer a lot of agricultural land, led them to being one of the largest revenue sources in the world at the time. And they were spending money on absolutely brain dead things like pilgrimages and feasts, right? Everyone's starving. Oh, let's have another feast. Let's have another more or less, what's the word? A superstitious allocation of capital. It was a superstitious allocation of capital, right? Things had gotten that far, which is why we continue to hearken back to the need and the meme, really, in Western civilization of the separation of church and state being such an integral part because of this capital allocation piece, right? The amount of wasted effort, energy, time, money that went into stuff back then was exactly why you had the equal and opposite reaction to people getting away from that world, right? So immediately the story of Don Quixote, which they treat in the book, The Sovereign Individual, is a perfect example where the characteristics that defined the state when church was imbued with the church, right? When the state was imbued with the church, it was all about chivalry and courtly behavior and all these kinds of things. And of course, when Don Quixote, a satirical comedy, is published, I forget how many years after it was written, but it was a real cycle. It was like something like 50 or 80 or 100 years after. Correct me if I'm wrong. I might be getting these dates wrong. But more or less, Don Quixote looks back at how much has changed since Martin Luther had come. It's not in the plot or in the story. It's not overtly like that, but it subverts what seemed like right and wrong at the time that Martin Luther wrote the piece, right? So they start laughing at all of the old behaviors because the world had changed so much. So it became a huge reference, this book, Don Quixote, to laugh at a time gone by. And it looks like we can do the same now, which is amazing, right? It took however many years after the separation of church and state in 1517 to be able to laugh at the things that we saw. But we're getting there now already. And it's only been 15 years with the second chapter of separation, the separation of money and state. Again, synchronicity on the same day, October 31st. We're starting to see the ability to laugh at a lot of this stuff because it's pretty funny, right? So, we don't want to laugh too much at Zelensky, okay? But let's just look at the Time article a little bit, right? Let's just look at the Time article, okay? Now, I don't want to laugh at the people dying over there. That's not good, right? We don't want to laugh at the Russians and the Ukrainians. We're not laughing at them. We're laughing at this idea that Zelensky was put up as some hero by all the forces that we're talking about, all the fiat forces that we're talking about, all right? So this is what they say, right? The usual sparkle of his optimism, his sense of humor, his tendency to liven up a meeting in the war room with a bit of banter or a body joke, none of that has survived into the second year of all-out war. Now he walks in, gets his updates, gives his orders, and walks out, says one longtime member of his team. Another tells me that most of all, Zelensky feels betrayed. He feels betrayed, guys, by his Western allies. Oh, he feels betrayed because of course, who wouldn't put their faith in the Biden administration in the United States of America? What a great partner. Who wouldn't want to go to war with these guys? They're the best. They're always in your corner. They never abandon you. Never, never. What a surprise. They're not helping him. Oh, my goodness, right? They have left him without the means to win the war, only the means to survive it. Wah, wah. But his convictions haven't changed, everyone. Despite the recent setbacks on the battlefield, he does not intend to give up fighting or to sue for any kind of peace. No. Why want peace? On the contrary, his belief in Ukraine's ultimate victory over Russia has hardened into a form that worries some of his advisors. Uh-oh. It is immovable, verging on the messianic. Whoa. He deludes himself, one of his closest aides tells him in frustration. We're out of options. We're not winning. But try telling him that, right? These are all quotes from it, right? So he's looking a little delusional. But here's the best part, right? Here's the best part. Here's what they're just openly admitting, right? Amid all the pressure to root out corruption, I assume, perhaps naively, that officials in Ukraine would think twice before taking a bribe, right? Naively, he assumed they would not take bribes or pocketing state funds. But when I made this point to a top presidential advisor in early October, he asked me to turn off the audio recorder so he could speak more freely. Simon, you're mistaken, he says. People are stealing like there's no tomorrow. Oh my God, I didn't know that was happening. Oh my God, what a surprise. What a surprise. Oh my goodness. They've been stealing the money we're sending them and they're not even using it for war? Whoa. Big time bad. Charlie Kirk says, a Ukrainian official just told Time magazine that 18 months into the war, corruption is as bad as ever. People are stealing like there's no tomorrow, and nobody fears accountability at all. Charlie Kirk asks, why are we paying for this? War Clandestine adds, the MSM admitted Ukraine is finished. This was inevitable. Anyone who told you otherwise is either a propagandist or a gullible parrot. The MSM said Ukraine were winning. Guys like me on the internet said the opposite. Who are the real experts, he asked, right? So Time Magazine is saying this, right? Here's what Kaneko the Great reports about all this. He says, Time Magazine reports that Ukraine struggles to rally financial support after its failed counteroffensive and amid allegations of widespread corruption. A top Ukrainian presidential advisor warns that people are stealing like there's no tomorrow. 59% of Americans don't want Congress to provide more weapons to Kiev, up from 35% in June. The southeastern fifth of Ukraine, where the population is predominantly Russian speakers, remains under Russian control. Zelensky's close advisors warn that he deludes himself. We're out of options. We're not winning, but try telling him that. Ukraine's shortage of soldiers is more dire than its deficit in arms and ammunition. Draft officers pull men off trains and buses and send them to the front. Could you imagine? The death toll has long surpassed 100,000 on both sides of the war, forcing the draft of the elderly, raising the average age of a Ukrainian soldier to around 43 years old. Could you imagine going to fight in a war? No, thank you. Ditches and shit like that. Corruption remains widespread despite Zelensky's firing numerous officers and the defense minister. Zelensky is worried that the focus of Ukraine's allies in the US and Europe, and of the global media has already shifted to Israel, Palestine, and the Gaza Strip. Zelensky, oh, you know, Israel, I'm so jealous. They're getting all the money. Oh. Why are Time Magazine and the corporate media starting to throw Ukraine and Zelensky under the bus? Kaneko, the Substack asks. We don't know, right? So War Clandestine adds the following. Whatever happened to the days of NAFO storming the comments to tell me how I was a Russian disinformation asset? I miss cackling at all the comically bad memes and the unfathomable levels of delusion and copium. Now they are mysteriously silent. Wonder why that is. So War Clandestine dancing on the grave of these folks. But here's the story for separation of money and state and the reason why I bring it up, right? So all of this money, all of this stuff that's gone over to Ukraine forever, and Zelensky's right to worry about the money going to Israel as well. But we finally had a bit of a change in how this is being treated in America. So I have no faith in this new speaker, all right? Just so you know that. I have no faith in this guy, right? So not even a little bit, right? In two parts. Okay, thank you for the... Thank you for that, right? Don Quixote, yeah, exactly. So it took them, here's my point, it took them 100 years to be able to laugh at what was happening when Martin Luther, and for the perception of people to change, for punchlines to just be what were normal, accepted norms in 1517. So it took 100 years for the environment that Martin Luther operated in to become a punchline and a joke for Don Quixote. Don Quixote being a satirical comedy, all right? By the way, I have an English literature degree, so I do have some experience in English literature. And if you didn't know this, English literature is really taught in the English tradition. If you're not from an English country, you wouldn't know this because I learned this when I moved to France. The only way I can get my credits when I moved to France was to go to political science school, because English literature in the American system, probably in the British system too, is taught much more like history. It's that the art itself, the pieces of work, can be windows into the time when they were written. So we treat literature almost as a economics, history. It's not really like about how it makes you feel. I was very surprised when I took literature classes in France, which was a completely different ballgame. But to get the credits I needed, I actually had to go into political science school because it's just the content is very different, right? So anyway, English degree, so do have a pretty good experience in the history of great English literature, let's say. And I'm not sure if I don't think Don Quixote was English, but nevertheless, it sort of, you know, if you're learning about the great books of all time, it's up there. So comedy. And again, the point that I'm trying to make is it took, you know, just normal, it would be normal to see the world this way, right? It took 100 years for perceptions to shift, for punchlines to be established, for what were, you know, politically engaged points 100 years earlier in 1517. But we get to do that with Bitcoin just 15 years after the white paper, right? So here's the good news, right? And here's the part about America. So don't trust the new speaker. Don't trust him, right? Haven't seen anything so far that makes me think this was a good deal, except this. So the most important thing the new speaker could do, as far as I'm concerned, the only real thing, I'll take any speaker who does this, actually. Like, I would have even taken a Democrat, right? If you're separating spending per bill so that Americans can finally see, because one of the tricks that the state has used, that the government has used, that the legislators have used to get out of their own personal responsibility is this omnibus bill bullshit, right? Because they get to always say, well, I got a bit of money from my people, right? Sorry, I voted to take everyone's rights away and throw a bunch of people in jail and fund whatever other bullshit no one else wanted. But that's always been the deal. The way that politicians have gotten out of putting their name on bad legislation is by throwing all the legislation into one pile, so you can't really tell the difference, right? So no one is accountable, more or less, to voting on mentally handicapped bills, and that's why we have created this completely retarded society that we live in. Pardon, sometimes I don't like to use the word retard, but that's the reason, right? So that's the reason. The reason that we find ourselves in all of this trouble is there's just been no feedback when it comes to government spending. The system that we've created cannot endure because none of these politicians ever have to live by their voting record. They never have to face the music, let's say. But now separating spending forces a spotlight on each and every individual legislator, and then every individual legislator now has a track record of voting and spending that makes a lot more sense when trying to grade them and actually give feedback and correct them and vote them out if they're terrible, right? So here's what the new speaker has done as of yesterday, which is great. So we've seen separation of Ukraine and Israel defense spending, right? So that was a big win for a lot of Americans. They said those things had to be separated. You couldn't throw them in together. But here's what he did for the Israel spending, right? You got to love this. This is actually cute and beautiful, right? And it's what I've been saying was going to be the case all along. So he just came out with the Israel aid bill, all right? And it's going to be $14.3 billion to Israel, okay? But where are they getting the money from? They're going to take it from the IRS. So there's no more money going to the IRS in the United States. Remember all that 87,000 people? And it's been a problem for the Republicans for a while. So they're going to cut all of that spending, take all the money they would give to the IRS to go shake you down for more cash, and they're going to send it to Israel, which I'm fine with. Because if you want to send IRS money anywhere, you send it to the bottom of the ocean, right? Send it to space, send it wherever you want. Just don't send me the bill, right? So now the IRS is going to not get the funding. Now, it doesn't really it's not a tax cut or anything like that. But would you want to give the money to the actual IRS so that they can be funded to get more of your money? Of course not, right? I'd have no problem with it being sent over there to Israel and no problem with it in the context that it's being done. So I definitely I'm happy about this. There's zero money for Ukraine in this bill, right? So Americans, indeed, Zelensky is right. Americans have moved on, right? You're the old, old partner, let's say. Now, not everyone's happy about the tax thing, right? You get Wall Street Silver, who makes a good point, right? Why do politicians insist on every problem in the world having to be funded by America? Americans can barely afford to pay their bills and buy groceries. Our border is porous. Crime is through the roof and cities are falling apart. Why don't we focus on fixing our problems at home first? And he brings that one of the memes where it's you get this like construction worker who's just sort of smiling, right? And he's like, well, this guy's can't feed his family or pay his bills, but boy, is he happy he's funding 2 wars abroad, right? He's with his hard hat on, right? So very, powerful image. So look, they're going to cut all the spending. And what we've been saying for a long time, and I think it's an important thing to talk about, right? Not giving the IRS money in this case. All that money that the Democrats talked about giving to the IRS has been such an easy lightning rod to focus attention. No one likes the IRS, not anyone in America, right? No one wants to pay their taxes to these morons. So having them now and having it an easy question, yes or no, do we fund them to get more, right? And then the Democrats went further, of course, saying let's arm them, let's train these IRS agents to be armed, right? Remember the job postings went out and everyone was said, oh my goodness, right? Armed IRS guards. So I have predicted from the early days of Bitcoin, right? Not 15 years ago, but 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, I predicted that the dollar and the Federal Reserve would die along with the IRS. They were born together and they would die together. And indeed, everything that we know, and it's a frame that I continue to use. I've put it in my book, The Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management, right? One frame you can often use when we talk about Bitcoin winning World War III. Another more helpful frame, if you're really into conversation with someone about this, is that Bitcoin actually ends World War I. Right? Because we haven't ended it yet. As far as I can tell, we have not ended World War I yet. I often say we haven't ended World War II yet, right? But it actually goes further. World War I being how you fund and pay for a war, gold-backed countries that built all those beautiful buildings 100 years ago, like Hungary and everywhere in Austria and all these places, right? Just look at Austria, the fountains. This is a big thing yesterday because everyone's laughing. They opened a new fountain in Vienna made by, my children could have made a much more beautiful fountain with their Play-Doh than the folks in Vienna managed to create. Now, Vienna being one of the most beautiful low time preference, gold-backed, created economies 100 years ago that made one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I've been to Vienna. It's amazing, just gorgeous, right? Like everywhere you turn, except now they have this new fountain made by people who have absolutely zero aesthetic appreciation, right? It really does look like it was made by my children. There's no doubt about it. If you're just going on symmetry, aesthetics, no doubt could have done better, because it's one of those ones that's so ugly you had to kind of go out of your way to make it ugly. Like it only a university trained person could make something that ugly. It's like having stupid opinions that are just word thinking, right? You know, you've heard all these people like the ones that are defending all the stuff that happened with Hamas in Israel, saying, oh, you know, sure, they found babies that were missing their heads, but you don't have proof. You don't have proof. Come on. It could have been anything. They could have just popped off, right? You get like normal people arguing the most crazy shit ever because they can't face the reality. And indeed, some of these opinions can only happen by people who are educated. Just like this art can only have been created by people who are actually have mental, like brain damage from fiat information sources. I believe the fake news and living your life in a pure fiat way actually causes brain damage, right? Like it degrades your capacity. Brain damage is maybe not recoverable. I'm not sure. I don't know. Like if you're sitting there and you're actually saying like Joe Biden is my leader, I love Joe Biden, or Justin Trudeau in Canada. We have a lot of brain damaged people in Canada, like actual brain damage, right? They're in Canada saying like, I stand with Justin Trudeau, he's great. This is a sign of actual brain damage, not just wrong, right? Oh, I'm wrong. Oh, I have opinions and they have opinions and we kind of disagree and this is an argument and like a debate. It's not a debate. Like the people who have lived in the fiat world, we're not debating with them, right? This is not like I have a point about sound money and then you say it's about Keynesian stuff. It's not that. That's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who are mentally handicapped. You don't argue with handicapped people. You don't. There's no way to go, right? You cannot argue with someone who doesn't have the capacity to think about these things. And it's not possible, right? Now, they can come to new conclusions, but it's not because of argument and logic. It's things like we're seeing. It is the actual shifting of what's right and wrong. It's that 100-year gap that went from the time of Martin Luther, because there would have been people at the Martin Luther time who'd have been like, yeah, we need chivalry. We gotta go more Christian. We gotta go more feasts. We gotta do more pilgrimages. That's the cure. I'm telling you, you just believe harder, right? So they weren't going to be laughing about how they were wrong at the time. It took 100 years for them to laugh at themselves being wrong. It took 100 years to erase the brain damage of that generation. So here we are, right? Luckily, we're moving quicker. Luckily, we're already having pretty fulsome talks in America about separating at least the IRS from the game. And I don't think this is going to stop, right? I don't think it's going to stop. But it's not just that, right? It's not just the new speaker IRS, which is, I think, a real opportunity to separate money and state. Again, the tax thing ain't going to make it much longer, right? Just a second. I don't think anyway. So where's my Kleenex? I thought I had a Kleenex here. Just give me 1 second. My nose is kind of running. I will be right back. There we go. So it's not just the new IRS, not the new speaker, the new IRS plan. You know, there's the corruption as well, right? Remember what we said was one of the best things for Bitcoin and this concept of the separation of money and state is the image of the president and the job and the mimetic power of the job, the mimetic title of the US president being the leader of the free world. So one of the greatest things about Trump being president that I thought at the time already, not the full reason why I supported him, right? I loved the humor, I loved all that stuff. But my support of 2015 Trump and 2016 Trump was because he was capable of changing reality around how we thought of the president, right? You saw it from Kanye West. Kanye West said that he didn't believe he could become president until he saw Donald Trump. the black thing with Obama for Kanye never made him think he could run for president. It was watching a TV celebrity and, branding expert run for president the way Trump did that made Kanye West think, oh, I could do this. Right now, it had nothing to do with it had nothing to do with the skin color, according to Kanye, right? The seeing a black man wasn't like, oh, I can be president, because everything that Obama represented, Kanye didn't really have access to. The way he spoke, right? The focus group weighting and careful selection of words that Obama was the best at, right? Obama was a very, very good speech deliverer, but the way the speeches were constructed was not the kind of system that Kanye would use to create his music. There were foreign information creation systems, right? And when Kanye, I'm just guessing, looked at the way he creates his communication and art and all that, and he looked at Trump, it's what I said about the first time I saw Trump. This is an artist. This is not, we're not dealing with a TV guy or a real estate developer or a politician or a businessman, nothing like that. We're dealing with an artist who is offensive by design. By design, he is offensive, right? That's how the art works. And that's how it persuades, that's how it functions. And so when you saw Kanye say, when he saw Trump, and this is one of his famous lines about all this stuff, Trump made me think I could be president. Now, the reason I supported Joe Biden in 2020 and was one of the first people to say, Joe Biden won, yay, right? Not exactly like that. But now in the summer of 2020, I kind of knew what was up, right? I got all these ballots in Brooklyn, and I said, this is going to be a bit sketchy. And I started predicting, but I had, it's not what I wanted, because I love Trump. I've said it many times, love Donald Trump. But in 2020, what I saw coming was it probably is not going to be him, not because he can't win, but because it's going to be super scammy and no one's going to have any confidence in this election. So at the time I said, well, the better result actually, as a Bitcoiner who's interested, very wedded to this idea of the separation of money and state, I said, well, why don't we have an election that no one has any credibility in? And why don't we pick a president whose brain doesn't work? Why not? Like it's the better solution. It's the better follow-up. It's the better sequel to the Trump 1 presidency. Trump 1 opened the doors to what we think of as the president. The made-up job of the president goes back to World War II, somewhat. Some people can say World War I. But it goes back to then, and this commander-in-chief thing and all that stuff that goes along with it is all just perpetuated from what we understood to be reality in the world wars. Now, they didn't change the job description. They didn't do anything like that. The job just kept growing in this direction, but it was time to change. There is no job description. The job is an organic practice and changes as the times change. And so I knew right away that Trump would be something different, and it would be shaking the box about what we've all come to know. And I thought Biden coming in 2020 would be the same. Now, again, it's not logic that I was using. I didn't want Joe Biden because I thought he would be good. It's not what I was like, oh, we need Joe Biden to be president. No. I wanted him there to do exactly what he's doing. Did you see him trying to hand out Halloween candy? He can't even do that. He dropped a bag of candy yesterday, and he can't bend over. He can't bend over. Like, he can't do anything like that, right? He can't walk on the beach. Remember the way Trump described him, that he can't lift his feet above the grains of sand because he does the dementia shuffle. There's been nothing more appealing than watching this person try to perform the job of president, right? It's like watching, everyone was making fun of Disney's Ahsoka show because the actress playing the Jedi is kind of a middle-aged woman, and she doesn't really have like the reflexes or the physical ability to be convincing as a Jedi Knight, right? Rosario Dawson is her name, who I thought, I watched that dumb show. I thought she did okay. But the fighting scenes, it's true. She's awful, like really bad. And watching Joe Biden try to perform the job with the mental capacity that he has is as pitiful as that. It's like trying to watch it's like Star Wars Kid. By the way, you guys, you remember Star Wars Lightning Saber Kid? The guy who got sort of ridiculed when those Star Wars movies were coming out 20 years ago. Does anyone remember that? It went really viral. He actually went to law school with some of my friends at the same time that I was going to law school here in Montreal. He's from Montreal, by the way. I've met him. It's an amazing story. He got a bunch of money out of it, by the way, and went into law and had a really neat life afterwards because of this. But if you remember, that was that fat kid who, you know, had a practicing his lightsaber or whatever. But funny story that he was, you know, involved in the law school scene when I was at law school. He went to McGill here in Montreal. I was in Quebec City, but we had friends in common and things like that. We, you know, he was kind of a celebrity, so we knew about him. So watching Biden do the job, right? Watching him try to answer questions and just function in this job is one of the best things we could have ever hoped for as Bitcoiners. Watching him fail, watching him be so pathetically unbelievable in the role, to the point where when we say, hey, there's a leader of the free world, it's an actual punchline now. It's the Don Quixote punchline. Look at that guy. He's a leader of the free world, man. You know, no one will believe it anymore, which is great, right? Because remember, it was, oh, Trump is going to ruin the reputation of America abroad. No one will take us seriously. Well, who's taking this Joe Biden seriously? Nobody. Everyone's laughing at this guy. How can you not? Anyone who spends 2 minutes with him, I'm sure, knows that America is run by not him, and it must leave them with a very chilling interpretation of what's going on in America. It is one of the best signals for the separation of money and state you can find, and it gets better. It gets better. Okay, so all that said, now it turns out that under legal pressure, right, the National Archives has located 82,000 pages, okay, guys? 82,000 pages of emails that President Joe Biden sent or received during his vice presidential tenure on 3 private pseudonymous accounts, a total that potentially dwarfs the amount that landed Hillary Clinton in hot water a decade ago, according to a federal court filing released Monday. So Kyle Becker bringing it up. National Archives uncovers 82,000 private emails. A lot of people talking about it today. Joe Biden used 3 aliases to loop Hunter Biden in on official government business that he could use for profit and personal gain. Now there's going to be a fella who is going to try and run against him now, right? So the Democrats even have a new person, Representative Dean Phillips, kind of a joke, but he's launched a primary challenge. So he actually has a competitor that isn't Marianne Williamson now. And he's claiming already that he's poised to lose against Trump in 2024, saying he's down 9 points in an ABC poll, down in all kinds of battleground states. All kinds of people don't like him. He's saying he beat Trump by about 40,000 votes in 2020. Anybody who can make the case to me that he's in a better position now than he was then, we're living in different worlds, he says, right? So it looks like he's going to do it. Now, Byron Donalds, who was supposed to be a speaker at Bitcoin in 2023, but because they had some debt ceiling vote or whatever, he wasn't able to make it. He says the following: the most damning. Now, Byron Donalds has been one of the people who's been named in the speaker circles. And he's also one of the people who's been on this talking points thing about Joe and Hunter Biden. And he's got banking experience as well, right? So he understands how this stuff works. So he says and he's a Bitcoiner, by the way. He's a friend of Pierre Rochard. It was Pierre Rochard who's supposed to interview him. The most damning evidence is now we are starting to see the transactions that went to Joe Biden, money actually going into his hands. There were payments made on behalf of Joe Biden where they didn't give the money to him, but the money was spent on his behalf. We have elements of the DOJ and the FBI that were covering up for the president, because this is the whole thing that we were talking about yesterday, that it looks like he was blackmailed. It looks like he's an agent, which is amazing. Like, we could not have hoped for a better fake president than this guy when it comes to setting Americans up to understand the need to separate money and state, right? So the story, the reason, the cognitive answer, the cognitive closure that will come from having the answer is in front of Americans right now. The stage could not be set more beautifully for the separation of money and state today. 15 years later, we're able to actually laugh at this stuff, just like in Don Quixote, right? But it gets better. It gets better, right? So we get all that stuff, right? Biden's new emails, the Hunter Biden laptop being probably the most amazing case of deep state corruption, the most amazing proof that we are run by organized crime and that we can't have any faith in any of our third-party apparatuses that are supposed to keep us safe in America, right? Almost all of them are now becoming a punchline, a joke, and completely the opposite of what they were supposed to do, right? So now we come to the great case of the disinformation around the Hunter Biden laptop thing and how Americans are becoming much more savvy about how disinformation works. We're seeing the machine for what it is. And again, I always bring you back to Mike Benz being one of the greatest, I'd say, clearest thinkers on any of the stuff that I've come across. He had a nice conversation with Elon Musk yesterday on X, on Twitter, about all of this stuff. But here's what he has to say about this stuff and how much of a light he's been shining on it. So he says, so the CIA's top incubator school, Yale University, hacked an anonymous message board of dissident thinking economists. All right, so think about this. Yale hacked an anonymous message board of dissident thinking economists, okay? Got 50,000 of their IP addresses, then published a study on toxic speech by these economist anons, concluding that anonymity is a threat to the economics profession. They actually did this. The universities, who are now trying to get us to be empathetic with them because people are getting fired because they're like, yeah, Hamas is cool. I'm okay with what they did because of something. These same people are out there saying being a non-economist is a danger to the economics profession. Now, of course it is, because it's all groupthink. And if you remove the groupthink piece, it falls apart very quickly, right? So now he goes in because Elon Musk, how do we stop all this stuff? Elon Musk asked him on Twitter, right? How do we stop this censorship industrial complex from perpetuating forward? And he said, it's going to take a broad coalition, right and left combined, state governments, great judges and lawyers, constant media awareness, international partners, congressional allies. The good news is freedom on X, lawsuits, Congress queries, and Twitter files moved mountains in the past year. And he says the following: a great example of this is how much has changed at government partner university censorship centers. 1 year ago, September 2022, Harvard bragged that the censorship centers were too big to fail. So here's their headline, right? Misinformation and disinformation studies are too big to fail. 6 suggestions for the field's future, right? So they go into all of this stuff, and they say, who are disinformation studies for? What agenda does the field serve? How can it be improved? While the increase in attention towards the topic in the last years is healthy, it has also led to an explosion of papers in all directions, and the field has been subject to various criticisms and attacks, right? So here they go into making sure it's around and blah, 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 right? So that was a year ago. That was September 2022. Misinformation, disinformation studies too big to fail. Now, just to remind you, Mike Benz is trying to focus attention on the middleware, the NewsGuard piece being the next pivot, right? That this third-party system, there'll be a new third-party system for information, right? Basically, like a trusted third-party information relay source, right? So as Bitcoiners, we all know trusted third parties are all of them, without exception. Doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin. They're all scams, right? There is no way that it's not a scam. Because the minute you put 3 people into the group, you're going to have one that tries to influence another, and there's persuasion, and everything gets, convoluted very quickly. So maybe there are examples of why you need trusted third parties out there. I can't think of many. So this was September 20th, 2022, right? Misinformation too big to fail. Washington Post, a year later, that was September 20th. This is September 25th, 2023. So 1 year and 5 days later. Misinformation research is buckling under GOP legal attacks. An escalating campaign has cast a pall over programs that study political disinformation and the quality of medical information online, right? So we see that the effects have had, some form of good news and have changed things, right? And it's allowed us to see things more clearly, right? So it's allowed people like Barry Weiss, writing for the New York Times, look at what she's just uncovered in the past, day. If you thought the Hitler-loving, so she's gone into the people the New York Times has been quoting about the Gaza-Israel stuff, right? And she says the following: if you thought that the Hitler-loving reporter in Gaza was the only scandal in the New York Times, think again. A few days ago, the paper published this story about the atmosphere in Saudi Arabia post-October 7th massacre. In it, you hear from Sultan Alamir, a grad student at Harvard Center's Mideast Studies, right? So he's a student at Harvard. Alamar is presented as an expert by the Times, but it took about 5 seconds for me to discover that he is also a person that celebrates the mass murder of Jews. Here's Alamar on Twitter on October 7th. What a sweet day, he says. So this is the guy the New York Times is quoting. On the day where they're kiting over and sawing, I don't even want to say it, doing what they're doing. And he's saying, what a sweet day. And this is the person the New York Times is quoting to persuade people. In 2021, the New York Times published this flattering profile of a professor named Rafit Alarir, praising him for his decision to teach Israeli poets, right? So what a nice guy. He's out there teaching poetry. Here is Rafit Alarir joking about whether or not an Israeli baby burned alive in an oven was cooked with or without baking powder. What a swell guy. Oh, what a nice fella. What a great fella. New York Times getting all the nice fellas, right? Barry Weiss goes on, what's going on here? Pretty simple. Institutions are a reflection of their people. This is what happens when a newspaper is overrun by reporters and editors trained at elite schools who have embraced a decolonial worldview. Reader, beware. Okay, so she used to write for the New York Times, right? She used to write for the New York Times. Now, I don't think she's laughing yet like I'm laughing. It's hard to laugh about the material she's talking about, especially in her case, right? But nevertheless, it's happening, right? More and more people are realizing how these things work. Konstantin Kisin says the same thing, right? He's the one who wrote that the day delusions died the other day, saying, and by the way, I don't know if you guys, this is a like kind of a private story. I didn't know this. You know Zuby, right? I was chatting with Zuby, I don't know, last year or 2 years ago, maybe, or 3 years ago. His boarding school roommate is Konstantin Kisin. They were boarding school roommates. Fun. Anyway, the New York Times was given a voice to enemies of America and enemies of the truth of the best part of the century, including allowing Walter Duranty to cover up Soviet crimes like the Holodomor. He won a Pulitzer Prize for his lies. The New York Times is the first refuge of the scoundrel, right? And now this was more subversive to say even 50 years ago, or sorry, 10 years ago. If you would have said this at the time of Satoshi's white paper, you would have been sort of a marginal opinion, right? No one would have been like, oh, it's the last refuge of the scoundrel. Someone would have thought, maybe they wrote a hit piece on Constantine and he's got his ass chapped, right? That's what it would have felt like. Now, when you read that kind of a thing, you go, yeah, this is a actual scam newspaper that has never been the news, not even close, right? So here's where things get great, right? Now, I've mentioned many times about how Bitcoiners are ahead on most of this stuff, right? So we were ahead on COVID about trusting the experts, trusting the science and all that stuff. Not that we got it right, but we just knew not trusting was the answer. We didn't know the answers of the vaccine and what was dangerous. We just said there is no way to tell your risk. And Bitcoiners are pretty used to understanding their own risks to the extent that they can, right? We manage our own risk. Remember, the big promise of Bitcoin is not to help your life or whatever. Let me even read what I put in my upcoming book, Bitcoiner's Handbook, because I wrote it really well. So I don't want to. I want to use what I had written, right? So here's what I say. On some of this stuff, right? Let me see. So here I am, and I'm trying to talk about Bitcoiner NPCs in this part, right? So just talking a bit about what they are, and I say, in this chapter, Dear Peer, serves not as a guide to change others, but as a map leading inward. The Bitcoiner NPC could be any one of us, a mirror reflecting our zeal, our fears, our unacknowledged contradictions. Acknowledging this possibility within us is our shield against the enchantment, a talisman crafted of self-awareness and humility. In this grand game, none are immune to persuasion, to the comfort of echo chambers. Our treasure, the sound money of Bitcoin, enhances gameplay, elevates life quality, yet it guarantees neither wisdom nor self-awareness. Those we must cultivate within ourselves through constant vigilance and an open heart. This is about personal responsibility in the end. It's that simple, right? And it is. That's what it's about. The whole thing is about personal responsibility to the extent that we can, right? And when I see Nick Carter, for example, right, who didn't sit around and bitch and whine and cry about fake news and they're running fake news on us, he went out and smashed them in the face using graph analysis of understanding block explorers. Remember, one of the big things that we're offering for the separation of money and state is the ability to actually turn the polarity of transparency around. I don't know if we're going to win the privacy debate individually. I don't know, right? But what I do know is we're not going to allow for more Joe Bidens and Hunter Bidens and things we don't know that are going on in the state and things we can't explain because we can't follow the money, right? All this ability to follow the money, to even understand the size and scale of the deep state, we can't do. We have no idea how big the deep state is. There's no way to tell because we can't follow the money. So the idea here that it's about a state that wants to spy on you and we need privacy protection, that's a part of the story. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners are trapped in that mindset. I continue to think of the other way around, how we can use Bitcoin to actually shoot it at the government to get transparency. That is the more important thing right now, as far as I can tell, in order to get the actual government to have feedback, to have an ability to understand, and for us to be able to understand what's going on with them. That's the most important thing that I can tell, because then we can actually size up the deep state and cut it down to size, right? We can't do that right now. We have no idea. There's no way to tell. And that's why we're all sitting here saying we just have to rip the things apart, state and money, because of the monster we've created. We've created an actual monster, and now we've got to destroy it. So Nick Carter goes out, right? Doesn't cry. They're running bad things about us. Oh, it's so mean, right? He says they're wrong, right? I can follow the money. They're wrong. They are lying. And this is one of the most caught red-handed examples you'll ever find, because everything that we've seen from Mike Benz, right? You get the Atlantic Council, you get the fake journalists, you get the fake experts, and then the politicians cite the fake experts, and then they're just citing each other, and it's a big circle jerk. And what do you get? More censorship, more rules, and all of this stuff, right? So Nick Carter goes out, puts a bounty for all of the weaponized autists out there, right? So weaponized autists, he gives them 21 prizes of $500 worth of Bitcoin to go and do graph analysis to prove these morons are all retarded and wrong. And he does it, and they're right? So he gets the Wall Street Journal to retract. The politicians haven't showed their face, but he's already smoked out Loomis, right? That's Cynthia Lummis. What a disappointment she is. What a disgusting disappointment she is. Disgusting, right? I can't even believe I've spent time with this woman at this point, right? And talking to her about Bitcoin as if she's on the same page as us. She's not, right? I don't know what happened the past couple of days. She's not on our side. So you get Nick Carter coming out and doing this, and it's a big deal, right? And now, we can laugh at Nick Carter. Oh, his star is going to continue to rise. After this, his star is 100% rising, 100% rising. This is one of the most amazing things we've ever seen, right? He's shown everyone how to deal with these bullies. He's shown everyone a case and that we can all model to go after these people, and it's super important, right? So the thing that he did to do this, the thing that he did to analyze all this stuff, is really what we need to do at scale, right? It doesn't really change. It's the same thing. We have to do it with every single story. And what will happen if we do it with every story, if we understand how to go after them and follow this stuff, right? Here's what we get, hopefully. And this is the real distance again that I want to measure. This is the 15 years since the white paper was published, right? Versus the 100 years it took to write Don Quixote after Martin Luther, right? This is from War Clandestine. This is all the stuff that's going on in Russia, Ukraine, Israel, the vaccine, the money, all of that stuff. He says, as Americans, we've been told our society is superior because we are free and other governments are cruel to their people. Well, it turns out we are not free. Our politicians traffic /molest kids. Okay, that's what he says. The US waged war across the globe for decades, and they create bioweapons that kill millions of people. How exactly are we the good guys? Americans have been conditioned to think that China, Russia, Iran are evil because they propagandize their people and limit their rights. You mean exactly what the US does. Now, I am not saying these other countries are good. Don't fall into some binary where I'm like, oh, we're the bad guys. Look, the American people, American governments, I would still take them over these bloodsuckers from China and Russia any day. Okay, any day. I'll take Joe Biden over Putin any day. I think, I can't imagine, for all the things that Putin says he's fighting for, I can't imagine underneath it all he's a good guy. Like, that's just where I'm at, right? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the history books will think of him differently. Maybe I'll learn something about him that I don't know. But I'm not going to put him in any strong category, let's say, right? So he's saying, you mean exactly what the US does. Everything we use to justify our supremacy over the rest of the world is based on lies. The America you thought you grew up in does not exist anymore, and I'm not sure if it ever did. The idea that we are the US and therefore are righteous is not only illogical, but historically inaccurate. The government after World War II have only spread corruption and death. Most Americans don't recognize this reality, but the rest of the world does, and they are fed up with our shit, right? So again, the thing that we're learning at scale is this. Now, I still think Americans are going to be able to claim the mantle of separating church and state. We're going to be the first to do it. I think everything we think about Americans, the brainwashing that's gone into making the American persona, is going to serve us in the end, and it's going to serve us well. Everything that he's lamenting here, that we haven't been free, the tricks that were played on the American mind can actually be turned against the monster. And I think they will be. And I think Bitcoin is already rallying those things. Take Nick Carter, for example. This is just a guy who would be your typical patriot for America. And I think what he's doing is somewhat infused by wanting to get back to the country you thought you lived in, right? Because we're just going to try and create what we thought we lived in, right? We're going to try and remake it using Bitcoin and separating money and state, which we're almost there too, guys. We're almost there. Getting close. All right, let me see these comments. A lot of comments today. We love it. Teleprompter guy. All right. Here, not sure if I've gone back far enough. Let me get this out of my way too. Believing the fiat standard goes along with some terrible lifestyle choices that add to brain damage. It's it's absolute brain damage. It's brain damage. It's not, oh, they have some opinions. We disagree, but I respect your opinions. If someone got hit in the head with a log and had brain damage, I wouldn't be like, I respect their opinions because they got hit by a log in the brain, right? I say that because that happened, chucking wood. One of my friends was never the same after. Took a log to the head when we were kids. Love to wake up and break. Let's go, Team Bitcoin. Todd, we love it. Spend and defend Ukraine and Israel, but not our southern borders. Makes sense. I learned recently we're not required to pay taxes to the IRS. Freedom Law School. Well, you're not required. You can do all kinds of fun games. There are ways. There are ways that are legal. Happy Halloween Bitcoin Tuesday, everyone. Indeed, we are here. Greg, what's up, my man? Yo, hi, Nolan. Good stuff. We love Greg. Greg was the fella who let me produce that, or had me produce the Cernovich thing we did. Stop putting the noose around your neck by signing the 1040 tax form. Only people living in DC have to legally pay. Yeah, we are not Americans for that reason. Brain damage from the jab. I remember The Kid in the Garage, classic. What was I talking about? The Kid in the Garage? I don't remember what I was talking about now. Biden's movement mimicking the fiat state of tyranny status in reality. It shows how dysfunctional the financial system has become, extremely dependent on believer with dementia. It's all that. It's just dementia people. 99% of the IRS are bullies. They don't usually go after non-flyers, I'm learning. Non-filers, yeah. Let's make sure to share the show today. We need 100 Bitcoiners in this show live. CK, we actually do, because the tracker here does not take Rumble. It only calculates from YouTube. But the Rumble folks come in pretty hot. When I usually go, there's usually like a 1 minute lag after I end, because I needed to get the link for the Rumble to start seeding it on Nostr and stuff like that. And usually when I get in, there's more watching live on Rumble than there are here, and it's usually up to like 70 or something when I check. So I think we're over 100 live. Weaponized autism is just as powerful as retard strength. Let's say that's not nice. Come on, it is though. I haven't seen details about what Lummis did. Sean, just disgusting garbage. She's garbage person. Disgusting human being. She can fuck off. Loomis is bought and paid for. Exactly, Jose. Never trust a politician. Yeah. It's a more annoying to me because there were Bitcoiners there early in her case, so we didn't think she could turn her back on us, but she didn't have any trouble doing it. The world is run by demons. Could be. But the history books say that the good guys won every war. As cliche as this sounds, V for Vendetta is a great rewatch because it's about COVID. Yeah, I haven't seen it in a while, guy. Government is the bad guys. Freedom has a cost. Honesty, integrity, and courage. Oh yeah, Star Wars Saber guy in the garage. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. What did you say about it? The kid class. Yeah. The kid in the garage. Yeah. Okay, you remember. Good. Yeah, he was cool. The great disappointment is coming. Russia and China need strong leaders. America can go with brain dead Biden. Yeah. What an amazing podcast today. Thanks, Greg. We love it. Please put the link to the American disappointment link, sir. It's coming. Thanks for another great show. Have a great rest of your white paper day. And you're right. First time watching on YouTube. Yeah. Came over so Jason Cadell just said he came over to YouTube. Yeah, I get about we get about 60 on YouTube, 60, 70, depending on the time. But for some reason, my counter doesn't pipe it in from Rumble. So I think we're at 100 and something total, which is good. And I believe we're the most watched Bitcoin daily news show in the world. I believe that. Simply Bitcoin, maybe, but I don't think so. About the same numbers as Simply Bitcoin, though. So there you go. All right, team. That's all I got for today. Enjoy your Bitcoin white paper day. Looks like we're winning, guys. Look, it took 150, 110 years to laugh at Martin Luther. We're doing it in like 15, 10x, which is great. All right, team.